Hi folks, Kevin here. How are you doing today? Well, I'm doing pretty well. It's very cold outside and I'm in the middle of starting some seeds over in the work area, which I already posted a video yesterday about. And today I want to share with you a topic that I think many of you are going to find very interesting, and it's Hugelkultur. So first, what is Hugelkultur? Hugelkultur has been made popular by two key people. First, Sepp Holzer, and the second one, Paul Wheaton from Permies.com or richsoil.com. And he has a large community that follow him. Other people, many people, Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast has discussed Hugelkultur. I don't know in recent times who's been talking about it. But what I want to share, and Hugelkultur, so what is it? So I guess the most simplistic form is taking wood, piling it up, putting in stacks, not on contour, but covering it with earth, covering it with soil, the topsoil if at all possible, and then growing in that. And often you see in some of the images, they're 5-6 foot high piles, and they have multiple functions, and I'm not going to go into those today because mine's a different slant. Some people would call these woody beds, and I have well over 1,000 linear feet of Hugel type structures that I've created on site. And I have some that I've been working on for a few years that I haven't done any planting with yet because of things I've learned along the way. So hopefully there'll be a whole series of videos to come over the next couple of years on some of the failures I've had with Hugelkultur, a great number of successes that I've had as well, and common challenges, things to think about when you're designing a Hugelkultur system. But for today's topic, what I want to share with you is what I'm calling a Hugelkultur pit. And I'm going to be showing you some Google Earth images and a diagrammatic representation of what I'm talking about. What I'm describing as Hugelkultur pits is what we did was we took a large excavator. We actually used a couple of excavators, a 30-ton excavator, dug down much deeper than you would dig down for foundation, greater than probably 12, 14 foot deep, probably 12 foot wide. I'm not sure of the exact dimensions because I really wasn't paying that close attention at the time, but these might be 30, 40 foot long, and we cut off the limbs, snap the limbs, take all the brush. We took the topsoil, the rocks, stone walls, all of the poison ivy in the area, and I'll describe that more in the Google Earth images and in the diagram that I show as well. So enough of me doing a preview of the topic. Let's get to the Google Earth shot and then to a diagrammatic representation, a drawing that I made a couple of years ago to help try and convey what we actually did. Unfortunately, I didn't get enough images throughout the whole process to share with you. Okay, so this part of the presentation, what I'm going to do is go over a Google Earth shot. So you can see down here, this is Google Earth. And the date on the timeline of this image is September of 2009. So this is a few years ago. Currently it's, what is this, March 2017. So here's the main road, our road. Here is an old road, an abandoned road, which is the border of our property here. Goes all the way back across here and then up this side. Now there's two little jots. This little 1 acre area here belongs to a neighbor, and there's a little over the 1 acre area here that belongs to another neighbor. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And we're going to look at this area right in here. So here, this is September of 2009, and all along in the area where my cursor is swinging around, things are going to change pretty drastically. So let's go ahead and go to the next timeline. So this is June of 2011. So in 2010, 1 year prior to everything that you see going on here, I had a friend come over with his large, basically a 30-ton, well actually two excavators, come over and help me make the transition here. So all this area where you see just gravel exposed now, and gravel down in here, and some of the gravel's been moved down around here around pond 4. So all of this material, we gained a great deal of excess material because we ended up coming up into this area here and taking out the majority of the ash trees that had all died. This was at a time when emerald ash borer had come in and infested our woodlots and killed, you know, probably 98% of the ash trees on our site. And this was due to an emerald ash boring insect, and the larvae of that, the insect bores through the bark, and the larvae actually migrates through and consumes the cambium layer, which is the basically the circulatory system for the trees, and destroys that layer, and the tree ultimately succumbs as a result. Now, there's a couple of reasons that it looks the way that it does. So this is all gravel now, and that's all our subsoil. We live in a large gravel glacial deposits in this part of the country. And so actually, I'll zoom out for a second, and these are gravel mining beds that are going on in my next door neighbor area. This is an old gravel bed all in here. It's all regrowth in here, and this is the old town dump. Again, this is our property right over here. I'll zoom back in. So all of these diseased and dead ash trees, well, we also had a plethora of poison ivy, vines, bushes, and ground cover in this area. And there were stone walls that came down in through here. So this was farmland that was probably, you know, depleted close to 100 years ago now. And as a result, the slope of the land naturally goes in this direction. However, the contour had all been disrupted because of the ways that they had actually worked the soil before. So there's actually some ruins down in this area, but I'm getting off topic. So this is an area, this whole area where you see these, the gravel in this area, there's all huge pits subterranean now. So all the trees, the wood stumps, the stone walls, the topsoil, including all of the poison ivy, large pits were dug down into the earth, and they were covered up with the gravel that was excavated out of the holes. When neighbors would drive by, they would you know, get up the courage to come down the driveway every once in a while and ask me, "Oh, what the hell are you doing?" And we see these mounds of dirt, much larger than you would see for, let's say, a large home. Huge piles of dirt going up, you know, from the excavation of a basement, much larger than that, or a swimming pool. And you know, basically a 30-ton excavator dug these massive holes all over the place, and all the trees, the stumps, with the exception of some of the trees, were actually used for firewood. But and you know, some of it was given away, and some of it was ultimately buried because it wasn't good quality firewood. So underneath this whole area are massive amounts of trees, stumps, rocks, topsoil. So I completely stripped the topsoil off of the area. We leveled it all off, and then we had a great deal of subsoil that we could use for fill in other parts of the property. So we used dump trucks and just kept moving all of that excess fill. It took 2 years to fill in all of the sinkholes, in a sense. So there'd be areas where in the spring thaw where some of the soil had worked its way down in between the tree material in these huge, I'm calling them Hugelkultur pits, and that is all subsequently stopped. So The next phase along the way, and let's go to the timeline. So this is 2011. This work was done in 2010. That's another blurry Google Earth shot. So here we are in 2015. So now we see there's an additional pond here and a pond here. And there's swale systems. So let me see if I can, here are the swale systems, these dark blue lines here, and there's mounds all along these systems. And you can already see the ponds without any more need to delineate them. But if I were to zoom in to this area here, pond 2, along this border right here, when excavating out this pond, we tapped into one of those huge Hugelkultur pits that were right on the margin here. Some of that material was taken out, but the vast majority of it is still buried underneath this. This is a large boulder pile that I have stacked right here. So along that border was filled with this Hugelkultur pit retains tremendous volumes of nutrient-rich water. So when it flows out of the Hugelkultur pit and into the pond system, it's not just teeming with nutrients that were buried in that area, because it was topsoil there, all the living material, all the organic material from the surface, from above the topsoil layer, including the topsoil layer, was deposited underground. And surprisingly to me, we noticed tremendous biological activity along this pond, as well as pond 1. The same thing happened along this edge. Now you can't see this from this Google Earth shot because of the angle that it's at, but there's teeming life in here. All of the fish and amphibians seek these areas initially. Now they're all over the ponds. But it was very similar to a reef keeping system. The other thing, when we excavated out all of these swales, we actually tapped into some of the tops of a couple of the Hugelkultur pits that are below this. So as a result, as we come across the property, all of the soil around here is much more saturated. Now again, this is all gravel area, and of course it just, it's large particles, large pores, so water actually percolates through that so quickly. However, with these large Hugelkultur pits, not only have we captured carbon and nitrogen down into the subsurface levels, but we've created an environment that I'm going to say is somewhat similar to a reef system, well, coral reef system, where there's tremendous biological activity in these systems, something that really merits further study. And these deep pits that have so much organic material in it retain so much water subsurface to here. That's also an amazing way. So we kept carbon from going into the atmosphere, because typically what I would have done years ago would be chop all this stuff down, put them in big brush piles, and have a controlled burn. Multiple burns for an area this size. So, and as you can see, it's greened up quite a bit. I've got various, this is another food forest in this area now as well. However, I'm renovating it again because I've got a rich resource for wood chips coming in, and so I'm building up these areas as well. So in between each one of these swale areas, I have, well, horseradish raised beds, I have garlic raised beds, besides all of the fruit and nut trees all throughout this whole area, and perennial bushes. So this has worked out extremely well, and so we've sequestered carbon. We've not let the nitrogen go into the atmosphere or the carbon go into the atmosphere. It created an opportunity for biological life to at least inhabit these water resources that are here. What the long-term effects of that, I don't know. But I wanted to share this aspect of the Hugelkultur system here on site. Absolutely amazing, and that's where I'll stop this part of the presentation. Okay, well, this is my diagrammatic representation of what's going on up front, the area that I just talked about where the Hugelkultur pits are. So here we have a gradual slope coming down, a swale cut into the landscape, into the slope on contour, a mound put up on the other side, trees and various plants planted down on this side, and the goal is to slowly spread and sink the water back into the aquifer and all. And you can see how the system is down here. Various perennials and some annuals growing all along the surface. I'm going to zoom back now some, and we can start looking below the area at my representation of what's this Hugelkultur pit is. Now, if I'd drawn these as tight as they actually are, you wouldn't be able to distinguish it. Just look like a jumble of different strings. But I wanted to show that, geez, yes, some of the limbs have been cut off of many of the trees, and they're jam-packed in here as well, but the root balls are intact. The trees have been cut down because some of the trenches or these large pits might only be 30, 40 feet long, maybe 10 foot wide, and all of these would be compacted down into these pit areas. And then the gravel material that was excavated out of the site would actually be put over the surface of it. And it created just this nice, smooth, somewhat flat, but not level, slope to the property that we looked at on the Google Earth shot. And then later on, as you saw in subsequent pictures, I came along and we put in the swales. And then we have we have some pioneer species. This is a mullein that grows up in this area. The fruit trees that I put into the area as well, and berry bushes and so on, and various companion plants. But and then you can see down in some of these swale areas where it's almost continuous with these huge Hugelkultur pits. So this is my drawing, if you will, my diagrammatic representation of what's actually below the area that's up in that part of the property where it's all gravel. And you can see it's by the blue. I'm using blue to represent all the water in here, and I taper off the blue as it's working its way down through the subsoil. And there isn't any hard pan that we hit, any clay in this area, so the water does leach out. But the tremendous volume of water that's retained within these Hugelkultur pits is absolutely phenomenal. When we dug some electric lines and water lines later on, anytime we got right close to those, boom, we'd have 4 foot, 5 foot deep trenches, and that water would just come rushing down the trench because I'd be working in the trench trying to bury the water line or electric line, covering it over with small fills so the big rocks didn't damage the wire or the piping, and that water would come rushing down like a bat out of hell. And it really is amazing how much is there. Now, if you can imagine also that if we have a pond that's excavated right up next to these areas, it creates all of this void area. And again, this is showing large voids in between. But it creates quite an environment and niches for organisms to actually replicate and live in these particular habitats that are there. Now again, I had no foresight that we would create this environment. I was thinking, well, I didn't want to put carbon and nitrogen back into the atmosphere. I wanted to deal with the poison ivy without having to burn it. I wanted to reduce the chances of the emerald ash going into other areas around the area. And I could also get some extra soil that I could use, or gravel material that I could build more roadways with, and build up the areas of the property where I didn't want it to slope off to the property line. All of those things were benefits that I saw initially, and we achieved those, and it was quite expensive going about doing this whole process. But I had no idea of the benefits that we'd be receiving down the road by doing this. And I think I'm just trying to make people aware that there may be hidden benefits. Now, many of my other Hugelkultur talks are going to have many of the pitfalls, things that the obstacles, the challenges that I've run into by putting all of the hugelkultur systems in that I have on property. But this particular system has given us tremendous benefits in multiple ways. So I just wanted to share this and actually try to do a drawing to show a representation of what's below that soil. Okay, I'm back. I'm really interested in what you think about that presentation that I just did with using Google Earth and the diagram. Did that make it clear? Do you have more questions about what these large hugel pits, the term that I'm using, are on the property? I see them as being a potential way of decreasing some of the what are called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, these incomplete combustion byproducts of burning materials, incinerating them, doing these large burning piles and putting more harmful carcinogens into our atmosphere, putting more carbon up into the ozone. I think this is a potential way of getting many more benefits. It is expensive. You got to use heavy equipment to do it. However, I think it is an option, something to discuss and to think about and to be aware of. And I think there's years of exploration to look at what it's doing with the ponds as well. The diversity of species and how all of the waterfowl, the fish-eating birds tend to gravitate towards those areas. Obviously, there's more life in that particular zone as well. Now, since the time of digging these ponds, the ponds have become more mature. They certainly aren't fully mature yet, but over time, hopefully I'd like to be able to get some tests and see what the concentrations, what organisms are down in those areas as well. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with others, please, because I'd really like to see us get away from burning these materials. Certainly other carbon sources can go into the earth in a similar way, construction materials as well. So these are things that I've been thinking about for in the future. So give it a thumbs up if you would, share it with your friends, and please interact with me. Let me know what you're thinking about this. Thanks so much and have a great day, folks. Bye-bye now.